Welcome to A Scrap Life, a podcast solely focused on the hustlers, grinders, operators, and business owners who live and breathe the scrap metal industry every day. Here is your host, Brett Eckhart.
What's going on, Aldo? We are excited to have you on. We are trying to put together our trade podcast to touch on non-ferrous. We've always done the ferrous one with Chad Ellerbrock. He's our resident ferrous expert, steel mill buyer, trader. But there is a void in the conversation of non-ferrous and kind of how it affects the small and medium-sized recyclers, scrap dealers out there. And so our goal is to kind of touch on the aluminum market and the copper markets. And we went looking for smart people so we can have these conversations with on a regular basis. And we found you, man. So we appreciate you coming on and talking copper with us this morning. We are going to do this on a more regular basis. And thanks for coming out, man. We appreciate you taking the time out of your vacation.
Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate you guys having me on. And if anything, I appreciate the kudos for finding me today on the copper. We'll do our best.
Yeah, I think you know enough to be dangerous, right? So that's what we're looking for. We want, that's what we want. I mean, the goal of the trade is to help your small and your medium-sized guys, maybe your big guys if they're listening, but just to kind of understand these market moves. Because when you're talking about guys that don't move 5 loads of number one copper a month, they're moving mixed loads. They're moving, 10, 20,000 pounds of number two, 10, 20,000 pounds of number one. Maybe they're not even moving chops. Maybe they're just moving, your brasses and whatever else. These market swings, while they're interesting and they garner a lot of media and attention, sometimes they don't mean a whole hell of a lot to the average trader, like the average guy buying and selling scrap, right? And so, that's the beauty of having Nick here, because he's the one handling all the buys for all of our yards internally, all of our recycling center buys. And so when these people, these electricians, these plumbers, and these people come through the door and they're like, oh, copper, it's on Bloomberg, it's on the news, there are 50% tariffs, and the price is going through the roof. Why is my copper price still the same? It's like, now we got to be able to explain it to them, right? And
I literally just got off a phone call with one of our biggest Comwire customers, and he doesn't usually hit me this hard, like, what did you pay me last time? What are you paying me today? So I called him because I already knew. He's like, he's getting hit with a 50% increase in a week. He just got that email. The owner got that email. So then he's getting grinded by the owner. Make sure we get the most for our copper. So I had to explain to him, like, hey, you go look at Comex, which we've been basing our pricing on our wire off that for a long time. And I was like, hey, I know Comex is insane right now, getting close to $6, but we're not getting Comex pricing anymore. And I still can't quite wrap my head around that. And that's why I'm glad we have someone smarter than myself here to tell me why we're not using Comex anymore.
Well, it's a one lifetime kind of situation that, quite frankly, we never seen before, right? And that's probably why it's gathering so much media attention as well. But to be honest with you, I think that I like your question, but in practicality, how does this affect what the medium and small size scrap dealers, traders do, right? Big companies, they have fancy hedging books and all of that, and they even struggling themselves to kind of navigate this through. But I would probably mention three main topics of how it's affecting the scrap trade for those mediums and a smaller size. One is that less and less Comex is going to be the driving index that we utilize to trade, meaning buy and sell copper in the U.S. A lot of consumers and suppliers, I would say begrudgingly, are moving to LME because more and more Comex is essentially a number that is supposed to represent physical trading of scrap, but more and more it doesn't. Okay, so that's one. Two, the movement to LME It's not going to be perfect and it's not going to be overnight. Okay. LME also has their issues. Remember, most people don't know this, or some people do, that LME is actually owned by a Chinese company many years ago. So that's another implication that we're trying to gauge how that's going to go play out in the long term. But for the medium and small size dealers, they're going to start seeing more pricing based off LME that they have in the past. So that's one significant change. The other significant change is in Comex, you guys and I have been very used to being given essentially spreads or discounts, and then kind of going off of your day. 2 or 3 days later, you come back and say, I want to do this trade. So now what we're seeing, more people are saying, my price is X. It's a very fixed price, and that price is changing every day, and is contingent on reconfirmation, right? So from a liquidity standpoint, the third point is that we're seeing less and less demand, because quite frankly, China has historically been 80% of the consumer base of copper exports out of the United States. So you imagine when your client, who is 80% of your business, is not very sure how his own sales and his own well-being is going to be, well, guess what? That he's not going to buy as much, and that is going to have a repercussion all to the marketplace.
Which totally makes sense. I mean, just for like a real world example, I've always sold my copper chops against the Comex, right? The spread at the beginning of the year was significantly different than the spread is today, right? And I was talking to our buyer, and he said, because of the volatility of the Comex, we can no longer price you off of the Comex. And they export a decent amount of material. They sell into the domestic market. He goes, because the export market has virtually disappeared for us, right? We can't. It's not something that we are even our market that we're even really even able to sell into anymore. So, which is interesting in the fact that the Comex is supposed to reflect the domestic market, right? Mm-hmm. So. It's kind of a catch-22. So now he's basically telling me, here's our spread based off of the LME, which I haven't been priced off the LME for years, right? But I understand where he's coming from, and as a buyer and a seller, which is what we are in this business, in this industry. It's hard to buy if you don't know what you're selling the material for, right? So it's super important to understand the dynamic of your sell price and how it's being affected. And basically, I say kind of get rid of the noise, because, if everybody is selling off the Comex, great. You're competing off the same number. If everybody's selling off the LME, great. You're competing off the same number. So you really are in a position as a buyer. Don't take it as a bad thing that you say now you're buying off the LME, because I promise you everybody else you're competing against is as well. So don't feel like you're kind of being blackballed or whatever the case may be. Everybody's buying off of the same market, right? Now, if somebody had an old order that was based off the Comex, they got to fill within the next couple of weeks, they may have a market advantage, but that market advantage will go away.
That's a short-term advantage.
Really soon.
Yeah.
It is short.
Everybody will then be kind of playing on a level playing field, and then it's going to go back to the way it's always been. Who's better at customer service? Who's better at taking care of the customer? Who's willing to work on whatever margin? But I want everybody to know that as this transition happens, I mean, it is real and it is happening, and you are not at a competitive disadvantage very, very much longer, right? So
no. And two things that you guys have been in business for many years. Fundamentals will prevail. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's it will carry us through this, and it has carried us through many issues in the past. Nobody is at a disadvantage on LME. What we forget about is, because we, quite frankly, in the American market has been quite frankly spoiled for many years, that most of the global trade on copper actually takes place on LME. Comex, has been a North America, index that we have used. But what we have neglected to see and to register is that, 10 years ago, the activity of Comex contracts being traded about 50% or so were being done by physical traders, meaning people who actually touch the scrap and warehouse it and trade it based on that. Today, the amount of people that actually trade Comex contracts on their Comex index that are physical traders is less than 25%. 70 to 80% of the Comex trades that takes place today are done by financial institutions, okay? Which their goal is completely different than us that we're physical traders. Basis LME, who most closely reflect global trade. Korea, consumers have been on LME index buying for eons. Canada has been on LME a lot for eons. China, the same thing. Europe has never had anything but LME. So we are actually a little bit of the one-off on Comex that has been the prevailing index in North America. But today, quite frankly, the pricing reference is so disengaged from physical trading that if there was ever a time to move to LME or a good reason to do it, this is kind of it.
It wasn't that long ago that the LME blew up on the nickel market, right? I mean, was it a couple of years ago that we were even talking about, does the LME even exist? And you and I were discussing this over the phone the other day. And we were like, it wasn't that long ago that people were wondering if the LME was even going to be functional. And now all of a sudden, because of the way copper is trading on the Comex and the way that the financial institutions are basically who never take possession, they're just using it as a trading vehicle. That's it, right?
Correct.
But it's having big implications into the actual physical market. It wasn't that long ago that the same conversation was being had about the LME on the nickel market.
Absolutely. And you know, in practical terms, right? I mean, think about it. If you put 10 people on a kayak and 7 of them are going left and 3 of them are going right, well, which way do you think that the kayak is going to go, right?
Left.
That's a very good analogy.
So that's exactly. So that's the pull of the market. We like it or not, you know, they provide liquidity to the marketplace, but their end goal is completely different than physical traders. And you know, here we are. LME is not perfect. It has their issues. You know, it's going to take a little bit of while for us, North America, to wrap our head around converting metric tons to pounds for those that are in non-ferrous. You know, they have different sizing of lots on the hedging side. Their margin calls are different. The hours of operations are different. So is it a perfect move? Absolutely not. But it does what it needs to do that mostly closer reflect the physical trading compared to the financial trading.
So I know a facet of your business, a big part of your business, you do a lot of things and I'm excited to talk about that later. But you basically help, you know, companies like us trade their material, right? If you don't have a full-time trader, then that's kind of one of the things you bring to the table as an option. So for the guys out there that are, you know, small, medium-sized operations, what kind of like practical day-to-day advice would you give them on the buy side? Like if you were talking directly to Nick, who's controlling the purchase of recycling center material, whether it's electricians and plumbers and whatever else, what would you give them for advice moving forward on how this market could look and what you can tell your customer base that they would understand, right? We understand Comex, LME, trade, you know, futures, but what do you tell an electrician or a plumber, you know, what to expect moving forward?
I think that what to expect moving forward is that we need to find good liquidity. You know, good trading is made on good liquidity, meaning that you have a willing party who is willing to pay for this scrap. Well, sometimes we get too into the weeds with this Comex situation. I understand the fascination. I studied it. I am fascinated by it, you know, but from a physical trading standpoint, is kind of a bit more simple. We could not continue to use Comex because it would be like saying that we're going to price steel based on the price of orange. Okay, it just doesn't have any correlation anymore. And I know it's hard for people to see it so simplistic and let it go. But at the end of the day, that's what it is. The index is no longer reflective of physical copper trading. Now we need to switch to LME, which is not perfect, but it's definitely more reflective of physical copper trading.
It definitely doesn't have the swings that we've seen, lately.
As of late,
It seems like it's a fairly steady, around that 440 mark for a while now,
Yeah.
compared to, Comex,
Yeah.
where you're getting big, 20,
Yeah.
mid 20-cent swings in a day, which is wild. So I think
Yeah.
maybe part of that is like a consistency for your customers, your day-to-day customers, your traditional electricians, plumbers, even your consolidators. Like, hey, you can probably expect roughly this pricing that you're getting today to be a lot more consistent in the future, right? So that
Yes.
versus you're not going to come in and get 20 cents higher or 30 cents higher one day, 30 cents lower the next day. It's probably a more consistent pricing expectation over the
It
short
is.
to medium term.
Which makes all our
It
lives a
is.
lot easier when it's just nice and steady. Those swings can be
Yeah.
hard to adjust to. Just making the switch to LME was a little hard to adjust to on like how my formula priced a lot of people. And why I think it's really important to get this out ASAP is the people that Brett hit it on, the people that do maybe one load every 60 days, because they might not know, So I hope we get that info out to them. Hey, you can't buy off this Comex formula
No.
because when you go to sell it, like you're gonna take it.
Are you having a harder time placing material for your clients, Aldo?
Yeah, yes, we have. I mean, our main consumer remains to be our copper refinery consumer in Europe, and we do very steady amount of business for them, especially out of the East Coast. Out of the West Coast, we deal a lot with the export market, and we're seeing some difficult spots on liquidity, mainly because their book of sales, everything is driven by demand, is quite uncertainty going forward. The domestic mills and the brass producers in the US are having a very hard time with the horizon of book of business. And when they don't need it, they're going to price it, with that reality, right? So most mills in the East Coast are being offered scrap right now, left and right. And some of them are saying that appointments are now into October. So that gives you an idea that the horizon for sales for them is not as strong as anybody would like.
Which can create basically cash flow issues for your,
Oh,
it's one thing to, this is like some advice, old school advice that my dad, gave me years ago. And when I very first started, and it was basically, in 06, 07, the pricing was coming down, and then before it kind of shot to the moon in 07, 08. And I was like, man, this pricing sucks, Dad. He goes, no, son. He goes, pricing sucks when you can't sell it, like for whatever the number is, right? He goes,
yes.
that's when it sucks. He goes, and I was like, oh yeah, whatever. And then the market started climbing 07, 08. And then in the middle of 08, like September, October, when it was like, when the market crashed, there was no place to sell it. And I was like, oh, I see what it sucks. It sucks when you cannot sell it. Even if you have to take a loss, right? Like if you're like, yeah, I bought it for 200, I'm selling it for 100, but at least I can sell it, get the money back and try again, right? But when you can't sell it, in copper's case right now, even if you can buy a load of copper for $3.50 or whatever that number is, that's great as long as you can sit on $130,000 and be comfortable with that until you can actually move it, right? And so that's where the small, medium-sized guy, I feel like you have to be very aware of where you're going to go with it. And if you're having trouble, moving it or whatever the case may be, that's when they would call someone like yourself. Hey, I need help moving this. And, that's a separate deal. But you better have good homes for your material, and you better have options, or else you're going to be fighting liquidity
And
issues.
hopefully you have good relationships with those homes, right? Which you've built over the years. So they
here's
here's
a number for you guys. I just discussed this with somebody out of the West Coast that was telling me that they're not selling. They want to take advantage of the market. And I say, okay, I'll give you a couple quick math here, right? let's say a load of number two copper, you essentially have probably about $160,000 worth of material into it. At 7% interest rate, you have about $50 to $60 of financing costs per day.
Yeah.
Okay. So anytime that you have inventory turns, and this is, as medium to small size guys, sometimes they don't take this into account, right? If it's going to take you 30 days to get that load out, just on financing alone, you spend about $1,500. Okay.
Yeah.
Which on a 42,000 pound load, you're talking about 3 cents a pound, so it starts adding up very, very quickly.
Yeah, and that's if you can move it in August or September. But if you have to wait till October or November, and that's not even taking, I mean, I guess if you wanted to hedge, I mean, what does it cost to hedge? Another nickel to a dime, whatever that number is, right?
Yeah, and that's the issue with that is that the margin calls are getting significantly. If you're doing Comex, right, they're getting
Yeah.
significant, like essentially ridiculous, right? I mean, think about it. Year to date, Comex has increased literally 50%, right? I mean, so can you imagine that margin calls on the side that you have to put collateral, cash, literally liquid collateral, to be able to cover that? So I can tell you from experience that a lot of the large buyers and large companies in the U.S., they're actually deciding that the best thing that they can do to essentially be liquid is to quickly buy and sell as quickly as they can. Again,
Yeah.
once another scrap fundamental 101, right?
What's the saying that you never go broke taking a profit? And I always
Hey,
say you never go broke getting your money back. Like maybe you didn't get a profit, but you never go broke if you can get your money back and try again. you know?
Yeah, I think like you guys and I talked about it last time that we were doing the podcast, right? I mean, what's the market price when you can find a buyer? What's
Yeah.
the price?
Yeah. 100%. I was just talking to my son about this yesterday with all of his shoes. He's like, "Oh, I've got a lot of inventory and they're worth this much money." I said, "It's not worth anything until you find somebody that's willing to pay you that amount of money for those shoes, And I was like, I mean, you could think that they're worth $150 a pair, $200 a pair, because that's his business, that's his deal. And I just said, but until you sell them for $150 or $200, they're worth zero. So you gotta find a willing buyer that's gonna pay you, X amount. And it sounds like in the copper trade right now, that's the biggest hurdle. And when I was talking to some guys that buy chops, they were telling me, the biggest hurdle for them right now is finding, buyers for their finished goods, right? So they're really not even wanting to purchase chops. They're like, well, I mean, we'll buy, but at X price or whatever.
Yeah.
So you either have to make a business decision right now, sell it at the number that they're willing to pay you, or be willing to sit. And if you don't have the cash flow to sit, you better understand your finance costs, which is what you just were discussing. This is what it's going to cost you to sit, especially if you're buying on a line of credit versus say cash, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're buying on a line of credit, then you get to understand what your carry cost is, and then you better hope that in October or November that there's somebody that wants to buy it, And I think this will shake out, but it's going to be a tumultuous couple months as people get readjusted to the LME versus the Comex pricing, and the competitive landscape is going to be super interesting, I feel like.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, we forget that once we ship a lot of material out of our yards, that gets converted into something else down the line, right? Somebody has to buy the next step of the product, right? And, if that is, wood paint oxide, copper oxide for wood treatment, paints, electrical wire, tubing, gutters, sheet, you name it, right? There has to be a consumer in the other side, and that is very unstable now. The bigger driver, of course, continues to be China. For the most part, they have been the global consumer of copper to the tune of, call it 75, 80% out of the United States. And when your biggest consumer is suffering, that's going to push down the line.
Yep. Well, do you have anything else, Nick?
No, very great information. I'm going to share some of this with our customers. I literally told one of our copper customers I was jumping on this podcast. I was going to bring up his concerns because, that is a thing that we've always dealt with, where our customers' price for the new product goes up dramatically, and then we don't see any increase or a decrease depending on the material and the time. And it's just kind of what Brett hinted at. It's just like he really appreciated that I called him because we were texting, and I was like, hey, I want to just explain what we're dealing with. He's like, hey, thanks for for sitting down and explaining it to me rather than just being like, it is what it is.
So to that point, I think like some words of wisdom for the guys out there that are, running, your small, medium-sized yards. If you have a customer that's consistently bringing you wire or plumbing, like number one, number two pipe, or you have a consistent copper customer, like be proactive and reach out to them and explain to them, hey, like, the pricing is super interesting right now. Like, we're doing everything we can to make sure we have good homes for our material. So your pricing is X. If we get a bump and we find, some adjustments upward, you're going to get them. For now, we just want you to know, your pricing is going to be consistent. And the more proactive you can be with your customer, the better. I really have always felt
it's easier if you tell them before they bring it than after they bring it.
100%.
Because it's just even that. I told him before he hauled it in, just like, hey, like it's up to you if you want to sit until this thing, fishes out. But I just don't see that happening anytime soon, and they need to move their material.
Yeah.
And it's a very legit question, right? Because we always, with the advance of cell phones, everybody knows what Comex is doing for the day, including the electrician guy, right? And there's a big difference that is, it's a legit question. Hey, is your pricing going up? If your pricing went up 50%, how come I haven't seen that 50% increase, right? And the best explanation is, hey, the index went up, not the pricing, right? Asia, which literally took the price from the day before the tariff announcement, which was like $1 plus, and they just added that to the discount the next day for those who were brave enough to quote the next day, and that's essentially what we're seeing. But the electrician doesn't get to know that, and we need to educate them, and we just got to say, hey, because there's a big difference between the index going up and the actual pricing going up.
So for the sellers out there, the guys selling, loads of copper, what advice would you give them?
Well, today, just some rough indications. Bear Bright is trading September minus like $1.25 roughly. Number one is September minus 135. And if you can allocate number two, Birchcliff today is roughly about September's minus $1.50 to $1.60. Percentage-wise, the LME, China, or some Asian consumers are paying roughly 98.5% for Bear Bright, which essentially equals like $1.20 on their Comex.
Yeah, that's good. No, that's a good information to have, and that's why we wanted you on here, and that's why we look forward to having you on in the future. If people want to get a hold of you, Aldo, just as a refresher, and we'll put your information up, and as we kind of keep going down this path, and real quick before you give us your info, Aldo will be joining myself at the Scrap Expo up on stage, and where we'll be discussing some ways that you can grow your business in times of uncertainty, and how you can kind of scale without maybe necessarily taking on big payroll, fixed cost increases, and he'll be joining us and I'm looking forward to that conversation. So we'll talk more about that later. But if anybody wants to get a hold of you, Aldo, how would they get a hold of you?
Email aldo@themetalsagency.com, or you can always reach out my cell phone. I work a scrap time zone, which is whenever that comes in at 510-219-0307. Happy to help, guys.
Hey, enjoy your vacation, man. Get back to your family, and we appreciate you carving out a little bit of time for us to kind of help everybody out in this scrap market and give us some insight.
Thank you, Aldo.
For my friends, For my friends, anytime, guys. Take care. Be well.
Appreciate you, sir.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye-bye.